69-year-old man, and he shows up in one of the craziest cities on earth with just a couple of dollars, a trunk full of books, and a mission that sounds, well, completely impossible. Now, this isn't a setup for a punchline. It's the real story of how a spiritual revolution kicked off right on the docks of New York City. Let's get into how this impossible mission actually became a reality. These were Śrīla Prabhupāda's first words about America back in 1965. Can you imagine standing all alone in a totally new country, surrounded by a culture he couldn't even begin to wrap his head around? He was just lost. It's this feeling of being completely isolated, but it's also the very beginning of one of the most incredible spiritual journeys of the 20th century.
All right, let's just break down the odds he was up against. First off, he's 69. That's an age when most people are thinking about kicking back and retiring. His entire net worth was about 40 rupees, which is, what, like $7 US? And his goal? Oh, just to introduce ancient Vedic wisdom to the entire Western world and start a global movement. You know, no big deal. The challenge was absolutely huge.
So, the big question is, how on earth did he pull it off? The answer, you'll find, isn't some clever business strategy. Nope. It's all rooted in a whole lifetime of getting ready, a life guided by a really surprising prophecy and a promise he made decades and decades earlier. See, his trip to America in '65 wasn't some last-minute decision. It was the final step in decades of focus, of struggle, and just pure, unwavering dedication. It was a path that, believe it or not, was kind of laid out for him from the moment he was born. And here's where the story gets really wild. It all starts with this crazy prediction. Right after he was born, his parents did what was traditional and took him to an astrologer to map out his future. And what that astrologer had to say was just, wow, absolutely astonishing. Just stop and think about that for a minute. Not just a vague prediction, but a specific age, 70, a journey across the ocean, and a precise number of temples, 108. This incredible forecast just sort of hung over his entire life like a blueprint for a future that, for a really long time, probably seemed like it was never going to happen. Okay. So the next huge moment comes in 1922. He meets the person who would become his spiritual guide, and in their very first meeting, he gets his life's mission. The instructions were crystal clear. First, take these teachings to the English-speaking world. Second, if you ever get any money, print books. That was it. Those two commands basically became his North Star for the rest of his life. But, you know, getting your mission and actually doing it are two totally different things. The road from that meeting in 1922 to him finally landing in America was 40 years long. It was this long, winding journey of patience, of just sticking with it and quietly preparing for what was to come. And during these decades, he wasn't just sitting around. He was a family man. He ran a business, but that spiritual work was always his #1 priority. He started a magazine called Back to Godhead all by himself, writing, editing, handing it out. Eventually, he left his family life behind to pour all his energy into translating these sacred texts. He even moved to the holy town of Vrindavan and became a renunciate, all to prepare for that mission he never, ever forgot. And then, finally, after all those years of trying, a door just opened. He met a businessman, and that led to a sponsorship from his son over in Pennsylvania. And then, after personally begging the head of a steamship company, he was given one ticket on a cargo ship heading west. And let me tell you, this journey was no luxury cruise. It was actually life-threatening. The seas were incredibly rough, and he had 2 heart attacks right in the middle of the Atlantic. He wrote later that he was sure a third one would kill him, but he kept going. He arrived in Boston after 35 days, a frail but incredibly determined old man right on the edge of his life's greatest work. So here we are, right back where we started, New York City. After months of really struggling, bouncing from one place to another, Prabhupada finally got a foothold right in the heart of the counterculture, the East Village. And this scene is just perfect. I mean, you couldn't make this up. On one side, you have this traditional elderly teacher from an ancient spiritual tradition. And on the other, you have the absolute epicenter of the youth rebellion. Kids who are fed up with the Vietnam War, with consumerism, with everything their parents' generation stood for. It looked like an impossible match. But the thing is, what he was offering wasn't just another set of rules. It was an experience, something real they could feel. And they were starving for it. He just started simply. He'd go to Tompkins Square Park, sit under a tree, and just start chanting. And slowly but surely, that sound, these ancient Sanskrit mantras, started to cut through all the noise of the city. It was joyful, it was out in the open, and it was free. And that sound started pulling in the exact people who seemed so different from him. The beatniks and the hippies who heard something real in his voice, a genuine alternative to the world they were trying to escape. So from these gatherings in the park, something more official started to take shape. In July of '66, he legally incorporated the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, or ISKCON. And its first ever headquarters, not some fancy temple, it was a tiny rented storefront on 2nd Avenue that, and you gotta love this, was called Matchless Gifts. But the vision he had, it was anything but small. The founding papers laid out these 7 really ambitious goals. Everything from spreading spiritual knowledge and encouraging chanting, to publishing books and teaching a simpler way of life. So the key thing here is he had a clear global vision right from day one. And what happened next? Well, it was nothing short of an explosion. That tiny little seed he planted in a New York storefront just grew with a speed that nobody could have seen coming, and it quickly became a real worldwide movement. The time between him arriving in '65 and when he passed away in '77 was only 12 years. Just 12. But what he managed to do in that little window of time is absolutely staggering. Let's really dig into the numbers here. Okay, first, just think about the travel. At an age when most of us would be slowing down, he kept up this relentless pace, circling the entire globe 14 times. That's more than once a year. He was personally guiding all these new centers that were popping up everywhere, inspiring his young followers on 6 different continents. This was not a mission run from an armchair. He built it on the ground, face to face. And then there's this number. Remember the astrologer's prediction from when he was born, the one that sounded so out there? It said he would establish 108 temples. Well, by the time he passed away, he had either founded or inspired over 100 centers, temples, farms, and schools all over the world. The prophecy, against every possible odd, came true. Something written in the stars in 1896 became a reality on the streets of London, Sydney, and San Francisco. It's just incredible. And he never forgot that second command from his master: print books. The publishing trust he started, the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust, became an absolute powerhouse. By 1977, it had given out over 50 million pieces of literature. And that's not just books, that's 50 million pieces of ancient wisdom translated and put right into the hands of millions of people all over the planet. He fulfilled that promise on an industrial scale. But beyond just the numbers, he built things that would last. He brought ancient festivals to Western city streets. He created a global management system to make sure the movement would survive after he was gone. And he set up schools and even a scientific institute to carry these teachings on for generations. And you know, despite all this incredible success, he stayed so humble. He never once took credit for how huge the movement became. He always said he was just a messenger, just an instrument carrying out the orders he got all those years ago. So that brings us right back to the beginning, to a single elderly man who didn't even know whether to turn left or right. His story really leads us with this powerful question: what really happens when one person's unwavering belief meets a world that's just desperate for meaning? It just goes to show you the true power of a single person, armed with nothing more than a timeless message and a promise they had to keep.